Sometimes you just need the right tool for the job, but most of the times you can't really afford it if you're a hobby machinist. So you make it yourself. This level was one of those times, peppered with improvised stock, improvised tools, and improvised techniques. The challenge was to make a super flat, dimensionally stable base, and a metal sarcophagus that could snugly hold the spirit capsule off the level without cracking its paper-thin glass. I started with the base, which led to gutting this vise, in the dear hope that its performances as raw cast iron could exceed the mediocre achievement of its previous existence as welding support. And that's because cast iron, contrary to cold-rolled steel, doesn't warp and twist like a snake on a hot plate when machined, which is pretty important when making a precision tool that that is not supposed to change tolerances over time. Next, I squared and cleaned all the surfaces on the mill, unironically rejoicing in the sweet delight that is machining cast iron for the first time. Pretty sweet. Then I just had to drill and thread a couple of holes. I power tapped halfway through to get a straight start and finished by hand to get a threaded hole instead of a broken tap. Then it was all the same on the other side. And just like that, it looked like that vise was meant to be a level all along. Then it was time to tailor a breast jacket for the capsule, which started with a shiny brass tube carefully placed in aluminium soft jaws. However, the rushed and eccentric nature of those soft jaws forced me to remove them to bore the center, trusting no harm would have come to the pure of heart. That's how I found out my heart is made of trash. But I was just getting started. In fact, if you look on Google for chatter, you'll find the upcoming clip. That was a 10mm boring bar, probably made of rubber, considering the price, with 1.5 miles of stick out. It gave the bore the same enticing surface finish a rush pickaxe job can provide to a mine shaft. But hey, at least the fit was about right. Now, rough sanding doesn't do much for looks, I'll give you that, but it sure adds personality. Then it was time to open a little squeaky window on the side to read the level once everything's together. Which brought me to finally machining the caps. It's one for each end of the tube to seal the capsule and mount the whole thing on the cast base. But even if there is no greater joy than machining brass on a lathe, that sounded like an insert so dull, even I couldn't ignore it. That's the stuff. What I was trying to achieve here was a very peculiar kind of press fit. The one you can tight securely by hand, but still undo with a pair of pliers after you drop the level on the ground. Exactly like that. In fact, I was so excited by the success of the fit that I forgot to film parting off the caps 2 times. And what was that? What the hell?
He fell for it! I need to tell you about PCBWay! Hey! Where are you going? Look, man, this is about steel, alright? Come over here! Look what I got for you! You like it, don't you? Have a taste on the house, man. And that is nothing. I got milling CNC 5-axis for you. I got lasers and bending. I got 3D printing if you're lazy. But if you're fancy, I got EDM wire cutter. What you mean where you can get it? There's a website. You just drop your stuff in here, select the material, select the tolerances, all the bells and whistles. Even a penguin can do it. Even you. Hey, look, he's coming back. Come on, go. Get steady. Come on. Listen. There's a link down below. Click it. Get the stuff. It's mind blowing. Don't f*** it up.
I think it was... Are you okay? I think we were about to go to the mill after I forgot to film the parting off of the caps, right? The main objective of this operation was to prevent the capsule from rolling off the base. The rather lazy solution was to mill a pair of flats. Clearance is clearance, and thank God for that. A critical aspect of any precision instrument is the calibration process, which requires some degree of built-in adjustability, here provided in the form of a basic but hopefully functional ball joint. Another critical aspect to any precision instrument is to leave enough clearance for its parts. So I also had to drill a hole I kind of forgot about when I was at the lathe. This, I'll admit, wasn't critical, but not slicing fingers on sharp corners could be classified at least as recommended. But there was still a piece missing, a protective sleeve that slides over the capsule to protect it when the level isn't in use. I'll admit I was partial toward the optionality of this feature, but having experienced firsthand how frail is the existence of those spirit capsules, I thought it was worth giving a shot. Especially when the executive decision of drilling exclusively with the carriage sped the tedious job of retracting the drill for chip evacuation by about 10,000%. Admittedly though, there's definitely a learning curve in feeding larger drills in the pilot hole. It's fine, it can happen. Okay, it's a steep learning curve. But eventually I got the feel for it. After a while you just learn to ignore it. Just like that, it was time to put it together. I would have never guessed, but precision levels are put together using plaster, so that you can soak them in water and change the capsule if it breaks. With the paper inside, the fit with the capsule wasn't all that loose anymore, and I sat on a pile of bricks for a moment there because it really takes nothing to crack these things. And eventually it fit. But I was still in time to put too much plaster on the end cap and compress the whole assembly to a sudden crush. But again, surprisingly, it was fine. And after a quick change of underwear, I was ready to make the standoff to mount the capsule on the base. I rounded off the ends by hand to match the ball nose countersink I made earlier on one of the caps for the ball joint. This will allow us to hinge the capsule on the standoff while keeping it secured, which is critical to calibrate the level. But it wasn't the time to run to the zoo and throw feces at the monkeys just yet. See that? That was bad. Rocking chairs don't make for great levels, so it was finally time to become a man and scrape the damn thing. Scraping is possibly the coolest aspect of machining because it allows you to achieve micron level accuracy using only hand tools. It's crazy. And it was also my first time doing it. So I needed a few things. I started by taking a piece of 20 millimeters wide hot rolled steel, 3 millimeters thick, and prepared to enhance it with carbide holding capabilities, which was as easy as milling a step and drilling a threaded hole. Then I made the clamping bit with a piece of the same stock with a simple hole and a relief cut in the center. Then, with 1 foot of the clamp on the handle and the other firmly on the carbide, the scraper was done. And if the stylistic choice of not removing the mill scale was dictated more by laziness than style, I like to blame the asinine decision of foregoing making a handle to sheer enthusiasm. I'm reasonably sure this numbness in the index finger is not permanent. The last obstacle on my way was to ease this piece of carbide into a scraping shape. And being so close to the final confrontation sprung me into a speed build frenzy, tearing apart this cheap grinder I use for tungsten and whip out a quick adapter with the leftover stock of the capsule to fit my newly acquired diamond cap wheel. Ta-da! I went for a 60mm radius, As for the cutting clearance, going for a 5 degrees negative rake was as easy as 3D printing this little platform. Unfortunately though, the only mirror observable in the final finish was the one of the truth. Coldin stating that between the optimal 3000 grit and my 180 grit abrasive wheel, there were about 2820 missing point of necessary care for a proper edge, but I kinda ignored it and soldiered on. That being said, a critical aspect about scraping that I was determined to get right was the necessity of keeping the work firm in place while making sure no external clamping forces could deform the geometry, nullifying any precision work.
No!
For a moment, I almost wished to have carpet on the workshop floor. Almost. But I was finally ready to start. Step 1 was to check for convexity, of which we had plenty. So I would give a first passage to the center before roughing the whole surface. It took me a hot minute to get a handle on the technique, mainly because my scraper didn't have a handle, but I slowly got a feel for it. Yeah, that's what a screw-up looks like. But it didn't matter. Scraping is a marathon, so I proceeded with 2 extra roughing passages across the whole surface before going back to the surface plate. And hinging the part showed me that despite all my shortcomings, the convexity had been neutralized and the real work could begin. It was time to get things blue and true. Now, the traditional way of bluing a plate would want you to mess with rollers and oil-based tint like some kind of deranged painter, but I wasn't ready to cut my left ear just yet. So I opted for walking the Renzetti path instead, hunting a deer and securing its skin on a 3D printed handle. Yes, I cannot believe I made a handle for the chamois and not one for the scraper. Moving on. Because it doesn't matter how big of a handle you can show if you don't have some Prussian blue. And even if making the pigment from scratch could seem a bit overkill, when you consider the time, hassle and costs to import the right flavor of dicam, taking advantage of the fact that in more sensible times my wife would have been burnt at the stake seemed the best option. And by the end of it, I had my own version of the dried and baked dicam paste Robin Renzetti likes to use. From there, it was just a matter of a touch of mineral spirit, a dab of blue. Okay, now. And I could finally use that dead deer skin for the greater good. Now, there's definitely a curve in learning how to properly blue a plate so that the color is thick enough to highlight the high spots in a visible way, but not so thick to make you think you're done before you're even starting. Luckily, spotting a false reading isn't that hard unless you're completely delusional about the process. Because scraping takes time and effort and patience. And I can see why it's often considered a grueling endeavor, because given I was less than beginner, but it took me 8 hours to scrape the teeny tiny piece of cast iron into a barely acceptable shape. But I really enjoyed the process, and I might have already developed a galloping addiction to the infinite possibilities that a mastery of scraping opens up for the mentally insane. And even if the irregular pattern and the scratchy marks scream amateurism to everyone watching, the mechanical performances of the final surface dramatically exceeded anything I could be hoping to achieve with any of my machines. Which to me is absolutely mind-blowing and incredibly fascinating again. And I already know there will be a lot more scraping in my life from now on, but we are not finished just yet. Because only a calibrated level is a usable level. And calibrating a level of this sensitivity is not fast, but the procedure is pretty straightforward. Or at least this is what I did. I started setting the capsule close to parallel with the base, just to be in the ballpark. And then I found a plane on the surface plate that was within the range of the level, so having the bubble in the center. Then I created a fixed reference point, and then I spent about 5 hours trying to adjust by 2 microns a nut with 1 millimeter pitch thread. And you know you're done when, whatever the position of the bubble, if you flip the level 180 degrees, the bubble ends up in the same place. Close enough. I'll machine some thin thread screws the next time around, but for now, this level is perfectly fine. I just needed to adjust the lathe. But to be honest, I'll probably just waste a lot of time trying to level things that don't need leveling at all. Dissuade me from that in the comments if you care. Like if you liked the video, and if you didn't like the video, I'm sorry, just share it with anyone you hate and put a like anyway to trick them in watching it, so you can waste some of their time too.